This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Leaders and officials from more than 100 nations attended the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. More than 40,000 activists and political and business leaders were also there. The three-day conference in June marked the 20th anniversary of the first UN Earth Summit, also held in Rio. That conference helped build support for the 1997 Kyoto Agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Rio Plus 20 conference sought to bring attention to 7 major issues. The UN says jobs, energy, and sustainable cities are of top importance. Food security, water, oceans, and dealing with disasters are other issues basic to lifting people out of poverty. The mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, took part in a discussion among mayors of some of the world's largest cities. They talked about measures to cut greenhouse gases. These gases are known to trap heat and have been linked to climate change. Cities are responsible for up to 75% of the gases. Mr. Bloomberg said the world's mayors are taking the lead on issues like the environment and sustainability. He said, even as progress at the national and international level has faltered, it's fair to say that world cities have forged ahead. And the reason for that is clear: mayors. He called them the great pragmatists on the world stage and said they are directly responsible for the well-being of the majority of the world's people. He said mayors just don't have the luxury to simply talk about change and not deliver it. Mayors reported using electric vehicles, better street lighting, and improved waste management to reduce cities' greenhouse emissions. Bindu Lohani is a top official with the Asian Development Bank based in the Philippines. The bank has promised billions to sustainable development. Mr. Lohani said Asia's fast growth places heavy pressure on the environment and society. He says the bank predicts that by 2050, more than 50% of the global economy will be in Asia. Some environmental activists complained that there were many promises of action at the Rio Plus 20 conference, but few clear targets for reducing pollution and the use of natural resources. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. To learn more about the Rio 20 conference, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also share your thoughts about the meeting. And you can read, listen, and learn English with our programs and activities.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. How much does a college education cost? In the United States, the College Board releases yearly reports on prices at colleges and universities. The group bases its findings on published tuition and fees, meaning the prices officially listed by the school. Students might pay less, for instance, if they receive scholarships. Nationally, tuition and fees at public four-year colleges and universities rose more than 8% during the academic year that just ended. The increase was 7% if you exclude California. California has about 10% of the nation's full-time students in public four-year colleges. In-state tuition and fees averaged more than $8,000 nationally. The average total charge, which includes housing and meals, was $17,000. The total charge for students from out of state was $30,000. Tuition and fees increased 4.5% at private nonprofit four-year schools. That was still higher than the inflation rate. The average was $28,500. For-profit schools charged an estimated $14,000 in tuition and fees. That was up 3.2% from the year before. One way for parents in the United States to start saving for college when their child is still very young is called a 529 plan. The plans are named for the part of the federal tax law that created them in 1996. All 50 states and the District of Columbia offer them. Private investment companies operate most of these plans, and each state has its own rules. Many plans are open to families from other states. 529 plans offer different investment choices. Families must decide how aggressively they want to put money into stocks, bonds, or other investments that can rise or fall in value. There are limits on how much families can put into 529 plans. Another choice is called a prepaid tuition plan. Parents can pay for an education at a public college or university in their state while their child is still growing up. But what if the child decides to go to school out of state, or not at all? The money can go to educate another family member, or the parents can withdraw it and pay taxes on the gains. There are other ways to save for college while also saving on taxes. One way is to put money for a child into what is called a custodial account until the child becomes an adult. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. President Obama had little time to celebrate his re-election in early November. He now turns his attention to negotiations with congressional leaders. By law, the United States faces a combination of big spending cuts and tax increases next year to deal with its budget deficits. Together, these measures are being called a fiscal cliff, and economists say they could push the country back into a recession. The Congressional Budget Office says that if current policies continue, they will place the budget on an unsustainable path. But the CBO warned that deep cuts could hurt economic growth. That would reduce federal revenue from taxes. Democrats and Republicans are trying to reach a deal on deficit reductions valued at over $600 billion. Those policies are to take effect on January 1st, 2013. They will happen unless the two main parties can reach agreement. The cuts would affect both the military spending that the Republican Party wants and the social programs supported by President Obama and his Democratic Party. The Democrats control the United States Senate, while Republicans hold a majority in the House of Representatives. One issue is whether to extend tax rate reductions that have been in place for years. Those tax cuts are set to disappear at the end of this year. The reduced tax rates apply to all Americans, whatever they earn. Republican lawmakers say they continue to support all of the lower tax rates. But President Obama and Democratic Party leaders have been seeking to end the tax cuts for the wealthiest taxpayers. Both sides have signaled a willingness to compromise. But without agreement, painful budget measures are sure to take effect. For VOA Learning English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. America's economy has started to grow again. Now, what about jobs? The government says productivity jumped in July, August, and September. That meant companies produced more with fewer workers. Also, new claims for unemployment aid fell at the end of October to the lowest number since January. But 8 million jobs have disappeared since the recession began in December of 2007. Jack Strauss at St. Louis University in Missouri says recent recoveries have been slow to create jobs. Experts debate the reason for these so-called jobless recoveries. But Professor Strauss says a banking crisis is especially hard to recover from because there is less money to lend to support growth. Banks have been holding bigger safety reserves. On November 4th, the Federal Reserve kept its target rate near zero for overnight loans between banks. The central bank said levels are likely to remain exceptionally low for an extended period. Low interest rates and growing federal deficits have weakened the dollar. But that also lowers the price of American exports, which could help drive job creation. Yet where exactly will future jobs come from? Investor Warren Buffett says America's future prosperity depends on its rail system. On November 3rd, his Berkshire Hathaway company agreed to buy the nation's second largest railroad, the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. The $44 billion deal is Berkshire's biggest ever. The Obama administration is also putting money into transportation to speed recovery. A program that paid Americans to buy new vehicles with higher fuel economy lifted sales for automakers. Ford just reported a profit of almost $1 billion for July through September. A second government program, a tax credit for first-time home buyers, has helped the housing market. These two programs fueled a lot of the recent economic growth. But economist Jack Strauss says credit conditions threatened the main engine of job growth since 2001, small businesses. In November, CIT, a lender to small and medium-sized businesses, sought bankruptcy protection from its creditors so it can reorganize. Taxpayers will likely lose more than $2 billion in federal rescue money. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report, available online at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. The international language of business is English, but a growing number of American companies that do business in China are having their workers learn Mandarin. Michael Chung is a Taiwanese-American internet entrepreneur and property developer. He is also in the business of teaching Chinese. Michael Chung is president and founder of the Mando Mandarin Online School. The school is based in New York and uses teachers in China to teach over webcams. Michael Chung says China is now the world's second largest economy. He says it makes sense to engage people in their own language and to understand their culture. He says that goes a long way in building strong relationships, especially with the Chinese. Michael Chung says that as China's economic power has increased, so has its cultural power. He says, starting in 2004, the Chinese Ministry of Education and the Chinese Language Council began to set up Confucius Institutes around the world. The purpose was to promote and develop Chinese language and culture teaching around the world. Now, he says, there are more than 300 Confucius Institutes in almost 100 countries. These institutes work to promote Chinese language at the university level. The Chinese government has partnered with colleges and the Asia Society to set up programs across the United States. High schools have also received money to start Chinese language training programs. Michael Chung says many English speakers want to learn Mandarin, and many people in China want to learn English. He adds that taking the time to learn someone else's language is a sign of respect and a way to build business relationships. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. About 1/3 of new nursing graduates in the United States are having trouble finding work. Alexandra Barenschub is finishing a master's degree program at the University of Maryland. She has done well in the program, earning the highest grade point average possible. But she is worried because she has not received job offers. Yet there is hope for nurses who complete studies at four-year schools or graduate-level programs. They have an easier time finding a job in healthcare than nurses graduating from a two-year degree program. Experts say there are fewer job openings because nurses in their 50s and 60s are delaying retirement. These workers are hoping to rebuild the savings they lost a few years ago during the financial crisis. Jane Kirschling is head of the University of Maryland's nursing school. She says weak economic conditions have created tensions in the job market. The number of students entering nursing school has risen sharply in recent years. At the same time, the United States is preparing for the retirement of millions of baby boomers. That is the name given to Americans born between the end of World War II and the early 1960s. Hundreds of thousands of nurses are expected to retire just as people their age need more medical care. Healthcare laws are changing in the United States. Health experts say they expect demand for nurses to care for the sick and aged to grow. They say many older nurses will retire if the economy improves. This would create job openings for younger nurses and recent college graduates. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.